Hello, this is Dr. Phil Rosenkrantz with a review of quiz number 2. Thought I'd go over it real quick and share the results. The grades you see in the grade book right now are a raw score plus a 8-point curve added on to everybody's grade. I'll kind of explain that as we go along. And so the curved scores, if you want to call them that, the average was 74.25 and the median was 77.5. For your information, the max grade was 108. So we had one perfect score with the 8 points makes 108, and the minimum score is 36. And so you can see the distribution of grades on the screen, and this is pretty typical of quiz number 2 and sometimes quiz number 3, but not always. And so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on there, and I'll move on. So I'm going to go through some of the questions. There's 3 types of questions on the quiz. There were questions that everybody got that were the same. There were questions that everybody got that were the same, except for you got different numbers than everybody else. But it was the same formulas, and so equal in terms of difficulty. And then there were questions that came from question banks. And so people got different, on a random basis, got different questions. The questions have been vetted over the years, so they're fairly equivalent in terms of each quiz. So I'm only going to go over some of the questions that everybody got on the quiz. Everybody had to do on the quiz. So let me start with question number 4. And that was a question where you needed to find an effective interest rate. And you can see on the screen, I'm with my cursor, you can see the correct answer on the left, and there's a little bit of wiggle room on how much of a how far off you can be and still get it correct. And then there were 29 people that got it correct, 7 people that got it wrong. Here you can see the solution. Before I go over that, let me point out that this question, calculating an effective interest rate, you had 2 homework problems where you had to do that, and you had 2 problems on the practice quiz where you had to do that. So this should not have been strange to anybody. But let me tell you what I think happened and what's going on. So we have a 3-year loan, but that doesn't affect the calculation of the effective interest rate. It is an annual interest rate based on how many compounding periods are in the year. And so it's the effect of compounding. So N is 36 in this case. That's the number of periods in this analysis, but we don't need that. M is always the number of compounding periods in a year. It's 12 here because we're making monthly payments. So that means that M is 12. R is the nominal interest rate, 0.05. So to get the periodic interest rate, I, we have to divide the 0.05 by 12. Here below that, I have the effective interest rate formula. And then using Excel, you can use the effect function. And so if you looked at the solutions for the homework problems that you had available, you could see that both of those methods were taught. So what I believe is that a lot of you are still confused about interest rates. You need to have on the tip of your tongue that the nominal interest rate is R, it's annual, without compounding. The effective interest rate takes into effect compounding based on the number of compounding periods. It could be quarterly, monthly, semi-annual, could be daily. You had one homework problem where it was daily. So I spent more time on this than I will on the other questions, but you need to master the understanding of the different interest rates. And we have more things coming up where we use the interest rate. I talked about the MARR the other day. That's another one. So you can't get those confused, and that's what's happening. So the next two questions, questions 8 and 9, you can see for both of those, if you look at the number of people that got it correct, we had 53% got it correct. Question 8, 64% for question 9. These are straightforward questions from question 8 is a chapter 4 question. Question 9 is a chapter 3 question. You're just calculating a future value for the question 8, and you're calculating a present value for question 9. And the people that got it right probably found it easy because they understood that they had to use the proper number of compounding periods and the correct value of the periodic interest rate. So for monthly compounding, they had to divide 0.09 by 12 and recognize they had 360 periods. And I show you here the calculations using both the factors and the Excel functions. Let me say something about Excel functions. You need to know how to do these problems both ways. Equally skilled. Sometimes you have a choice of which one to use. Like here, you had your choice. Sometimes I specify which you saw in some of the other questions to give me the proper notation in a multiple choice question. If what you were supposed to do in module 2 was watch the video that went over the Excel functions and their notation and compared them to the functional notation or the factors. And so if you didn't watch that, I suggest you go back and watch it. It was in the instructions for module 2. I'm going to move on because you can come back and look at these yourself. Now, question 5 was a question that was on the practice quiz, exactly word for word, dot for dot. And 30 of you got it right, but 6 of you got it wrong. So there's a moral there somewhere where you can figure it out. Okay. Next, then we go to question 12. This was similar to homework problem 477, but these two questions are the two questions where everybody got the same question, but people got different numbers. And so Canvas fills in random numbers and then compares the solution using the formulas to what you gave for your answer. And so for problem 12, if you look at the cash flow diagram, and by the way, I suggest you draw a cash flow diagram for every question, for every homework question that you can, because that's how you figure out how to solve it. So here we have a uniform series of 1226, and this is a number for one student. And then there was a gradient of 1610 on top of that. And so the question is asking, what is the equivalent uniform series to these two series together? So you have to take the gradient and find its uniform series, either using factor notation. Well, you have to use factor notation because Excel doesn't have gradients. and then add the gradient, add the uniform series you get from the gradient to the uniform series you already have to get the new uniform series or A value. Now, there's another way you can do this problem, and that is just find the present value for each one of these 6 years, add them together, and then find the uniform series. That's kind of a brute force method. Well, 6 people got this right, and 30 people missed it. You didn't have this exact same question on your homework, but you had the similar calculations in the book example and on the lecture. So this was a doable problem for this quiz, but it was worth 8 points. And what I did was I decided to just go ahead and add 8 points to everybody's score as a curve to be a nice guy or whatever. But anyway, let me move on. Oops. Now, for the next question, again, this one was really basic. You were given a uniform series and a present value, and you were asked to find the equivalent uniform series for these together. So you had to find what the payment was for this present value, and then add that to your other uniform series to get the final one. And so I showed it here with the using Excel, because in this case, the interest rate generated by Canvas was a decimal, and that's a messy thing to do with factor notation. You can do it, but this is so easy with Excel. So let me move on. This question, 13 people got wrong, and nobody should have gotten this one wrong. All you're being asked to do is find the present value that's equivalent to these two future values. So you find the present value of 10,000 at 20 years at 12%, and then find the present value of $3,000. That's a negative 3,000 for 10 years at 12%. Add those two together, and the number rounds off to 71, but it's technically 70.75. But I think the 13 people that missed this either didn't understand the concept of, they didn't understand chapter 3 concept of taking specific values, lump sums, and combining them. So this is a simple, as simple as it gets, chapter 3 question. Suppose you want to know how much to invest now to have 10,000 in 20 years. And then, so this was using basic information, and you want to find the p-value, and you're asked what formula that you using the notation. And none of these factors shown were correct. So the correct answer was none of these responses. And the people that responded to this one, the first one, there's a gradient here, but there's no gradient anywhere in this question. And then this one is asked, it talks about a uniform series. There's no uniform series in this question. Anyway, if you missed this, you need to make sure you understand why you missed it. Question 16, 30 people got this right, and you're asked, you have a present value of 10,000, and it's going to grow to 20,000 over 6 years. The question is, what's the interest rate, the nominal interest rate for this? Because this is annual, with no monthly, it's an annual compounding. So how do you find that? There's several ways to do it. You can use the IRR function, you can use the rate function, you can use the tables and interpolate, you can use trial and error. And there's lots of ways to get it. 30 of you got it right. So anyway, that's the end of this. And I'm not going to edit it. I'm just going to, pretty much put it up. And hopefully this helps. I'm not going to be creating this kind of a review for all the quizzes. Probably this is the only time I'm going into this kind of detail, because I want you to make sure you're on track for what to expect in the future, what it's going to look like, so that you can study better and be better prepared. It looks to me like half the class pretty much knows what's going on, and the rest of the class is somewhere on a scale of not knowing very much to kind of knowing. So anyway, with that, I'm going to move on. Thanks. Bye.